The preseason All Big 12 team was announced and 5 Longhorns are on it. Who got snubbed? Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? We discuss.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. And on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we're discussing the preseason All Big 12 teams and the 5 Longhorns on it. We're talking about some offensive line updates from inside Texas. And in the last segment, Jordan Washington, the latest Longhorn to commit to the 40 acres. All of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're watching on YouTube and you enjoy the show, as always, please like, please subscribe. I'm thankful for all your support, whether it's on audio or on YouTube. So we're talking about the preseason All Big 12 team. And as I mentioned in the open, 5 Longhorns made it. And I was a little surprised. Not that 5 Longhorns made it or that it should have been more, but, you know, Texas is the overwhelming favorite to win the conference this year. So I thought that Texas would have a way bigger number of selections than the rest of the teams, right? I thought there would be a clear discrepancy. That was not the case. Texas led the way with 5, so they did have the most as the favorite to win the conference. But Kansas, Kansas State, and TCU all had 4 representatives on the preseason All Big 12 team compared to Texas, who I think is significantly more talented than those 3 teams I just mentioned with 5. The rest of the teams fall in somewhere between 3 and 1, with Houston and UCF, 2 members of the new Big 12, having 0 All Big 12 preseason team representatives. So Texas did lead the way with 5. I expected them to have at least 2 or 3 more than the next team, but I was perfectly fine with the players they picked. I did have a snub pick. I will tell you that later on in the segment. So as far as the first Big 3 awards, before we get into the 5 players from Texas that were mentioned, they have Jalon Daniels from Kansas as the Offensive Player of the Year, and I completely understand why he would be the pick as the Offensive Player of the Year coming into the season and why he would be the pick as the first team Big 12 quarterback coming into the season. But I think they completely got this wrong. Like, it'll be wrong at the end of the season. I don't think the pick was wrong, but I think it'll definitely be wrong at the end of the season. I think it'll be Quinn Ewers or another Texas player on this offense, but I actually think it'll be Quinn Ewers who will win Offensive Player of the Year. When you look at Jalon Daniels, I get the pick because you can make the argument that he is the best returning quarterback in the Big 12. Some would say it's Dillon Gabriel. Some would say it's Jalon Daniels. I'm not particularly fond of either one of them, so it really doesn't matter to me. But I can understand why you would say Jalon Daniels might have the best year of any quarterback in the Big 12, right? Because last year he was really good, 270 scrimmage yards per game, 25 touchdowns in the 9 games he played, and he had an 88 QBR, right? And that Kansas team started off 5-0. Really until he got hurt. You know, it's kind of when their season got derailed, and he's a really special player and somebody that brings dual threat capability to the game, right? Which Quinn Ewers doesn't. He's going to run the ball and pass the ball. I think he had 419 rushing yards last year. He'll probably expand on that if he plays for a full season. Also, when you look at the Texas Longhorns, they have so many different guys on offense that could shine this year. You know, would you be surprised if Jonathan Brooks won Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year? No. Would you be super surprised if Xavier Worthy won it? No. So we have a lot of dominant players on offense who all could hold their own. When you look at Kansas, Devin Neal is very special at the running back position. But outside of that, it's probably Jalon Daniels or bust. So you could make a strong argument that Jalon Daniels was better than Quinn Ewers last year. So coming into the season, he gets the preseason pick, and he's going to have gaudy stats because he's literally going to be Kansas's offense this season. That's not going to be the case for Quinn Ewers. But I think Quinn is going to win it because last year we saw Bijan Robinson undoubtedly, in my mind, have a better season than Max Duggan. But Max Duggan won Offensive Player of the Year because he was leading a team that was the best team in the Big 12, at least into the Big 12 championship game. That's going to be true for Quinn Ewers this year. He is going to be the leader of a football team that is unquestionably the best football team in the Big 12. I think Texas will not only beat Kansas head-to-head, but will have 2 to 3 more wins than Kansas on the season. So from a team success perspective, Quinn Ewers will deserve the award. Also, I think that Texas will have a top 10 offense in the country. And because of that and all of the weapons at his disposal, Quinn Ewers will have crazy numbers this year as well. I've said he won't make a Joe Burrow jump. He might not even have the Mac Jones 2020 numbers, but he's going to throw for over 4,000 yards. He's going to throw for 35 plus touchdowns, and Texas is going to win 10 games. That should be enough to win Quinn Ewers Offensive Player of the Year. So I'm not mad that Jalon Daniels was the preseason pick, but he won't be the postseason pick. It'll be Quinn Ewers. Defensive Player of the Year, Jaylan Ford, and I don't care if this is a makeup award or not. He needs to win it this year. Imagine having 119 total tackles, 2 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 4 interceptions and not being the Defensive Player of the Year last year. It was a complete travesty that he didn't win it, but he will win it this season. They already gave him the preseason pick. And I think regardless of what he does this year, even if he doesn't match the stat line from last year, as long as he has a really good season, which we know Jaylan Ford will, he will be the Defensive Player of the Year in the Big 12. I don't think it'll be close. And I think team success will factor into that as well, because the player from Kansas State won it last year, and that probably had a lot to do with them being a little bit better than Texas was. And then for Newcomer of the Year, they have Treshaun Ward from Kansas State. I'm not mad at this pick at all. It's probably the pick I would have made. I know a lot of Texas fans are really high on A.D. Mitchell, and I think A.D. Mitchell is going to have an amazing year. But he's probably, at least in terms of stature, some people think he's better than Xavier Worthy. But coming into the season, he's your wide receiver 2 behind Xavier Worthy. Plus, you're going to run the ball a lot. You're going to feature JT Sanders, Isaiah Nayor, Jordan Whittington, and some other players. Treshaun Ward is literally taking over the Deuce Vaughn role, right? He was a really good running back at Florida State. Deuce Vaughn went to the league, and now he's taken over that role behind one of the best offensive lines in the country, definitely the best offensive line in the Big 12. Treshaun Ward last year at Florida State, 628 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns on only 95 carries, 6.6 yards per carry. I think if you thrust him into being the number 1 running back and number 1 playmaker for Kansas State behind that offensive line, he's going to put up crazy numbers this year, probably 1,600 yards from scrimmage and 15 plus touchdowns. I think that's definitely enough to get him Newcomer of the Year and some Offensive Player of the Year consideration for a really good Kansas State team. So I understand why people would say A.D. Mitchell. I think Treshaun Ward has a better chance to win that award this year from Kansas State. Now, when you look at the 5 players that were selected to the all preseason Big 12 team, they all make sense. Xavier Worthy definitely should be there if this offense has the type of season we expect it to. JT Sanders was the first team all Big 12 tight end last year, and I don't think there's a tight end in the conference that compares to his skill set and the level of production he could put up this year. Kelvin Banks, I think he's one of the best left tackles in the country, so of course he's one of the 5 best linemen in the Big 12, right? And the fact that he wasn't unanimous is insane to me. Byron Murphy, I would have put T'Vondre Sweat there, but I think they both have a chance to have a really good season. They both have a chance to be 2 of the 5 best defensive linemen in the conference. So I would have liked to see T'Vondre Sweat on there, but I'm not mad with the Byron Murphy pick. I think they both end up either first team or first and second team respectively. And then, of course, Jaylan Ford. You can't have the Defensive Player of the Year pick not be on the first team. So I was not mad with any of those players, and I thought that they all got it right in terms of those players. Like I said, I would have liked to see Quinn Ewers on there, but I understand why Jalon Daniels was. Jonathan Brooks, I think, has a chance to make first team, but I understand why Devin Neal and Richard Reese were ahead of him and why Treshaun Ward is on there for Newcomer of the Year. So, I understand him not making it. Any of the other receivers, they're going to give Xavier Worthy the nod, and we'll have to wait and see about everybody else. So I thought the 5 that made it deserved to make it. The biggest snub for me was Jahdae Barron, and I just don't understand the Jahdae Barron disrespect. I don't understand what people are watching or not watching when it comes to Jahdae Barron, because he had an amazing season last year. It was only honorable mention on the All Big 12 from what I remember. 74 tackles, 1 sack, 2 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery, and 2 touchdowns. And he's not even on the All Big 12 preseason team coming into the season. So you're telling me that there's 5 DBs in the Big 12 right now better than Jahdae Barron, or that are going to have a better season than Jahdae Barron? I just don't see it. And when you look at the plays he made last year, they were huge, right? His 2 interceptions, one against Oklahoma when they were driving to try to get that 0 off the board. Another one was a pick 6 against UTSA, even though we were up by 2-3 touchdowns at that point. We were playing with our food earlier in the game. That kind of sealed it. And then he had the fumble recovery against TCU that put us back in the game temporarily when we couldn't score at all. So Jahdae Barron not only was one of the best nickel corners in the country last year, he made a ton of impact plays for Texas. He'll be even better this season, and it's a shame that nobody outside of Texas fans can see it. He was my biggest snub on the preseason All Big 12 team, but nonetheless, Texas was represented really well with 5 selections on a team that is the heavy favorite to win the conference this year. Of course, I love the preseason All Big 12 team, but let's go out and produce on the field and make sure we have at least 5 players on the All Big 12 team at the end of the season. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we're going to talk about some offensive line updates, which could get really interesting going into the season. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, the official betting partner of Major League Baseball. So some very interesting updates coming from inside Texas on the offensive line. And if you've watched the show, I think that Texas is going to be really good this year, but I do have concerns still about the interior offensive line and the pass rush. The interior offensive line, will we get increased production from what we saw last year from Cole Hutson and DJ Campbell at that right guard spot, and then Jake Majors at center and Hayden Connor at left guard? I was pleased with what I saw from Kelvin Banks and Christian Jones. And in terms of a pass rush, I know that we have a lot of really talented players on that line, and we did a really good job of getting pressure last year, but will that turn into sacks? And can we get sacks with 4? Can we get a pass rush with 4? Or will Pete Kwiatkowski have to dial up a lot of blitzes like we saw last season, which takes away from your coverage on the back end? Those are my biggest questions for this Texas football team going into the season. So I was pleased that Inside Texas put out some updates on the offensive line, and here they are, right? DJ Campbell and Cole Hutson right now in the midst of summer workouts. I think they only have, it's either 2 hours per day or 2 hours per week that they can actually hone in on actual football stuff. So, don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. But whatever it is, that's where we're seeing the competition part before fall camp. DJ Campbell and Cole Hutson competing at that right guard spot. Cole Hutson and Jake Majors also competing at center. Cam Williams is your swing tackle, and we can expect to see him in that Andre Carriage role from last year in the jumbo package as an extra tight end. And Texas could use 7 to 8 offensive linemen this year, because even though you have to put your best 5 out there to start the game, Kyle Flood may feel like we have 7 or 8 offensive linemen that can contribute to winning this season. So a lot of really good updates on the offensive line there. Let's start with the first one, DJ Campbell and Cole Hutson competing at right guard. And I think this is a huge season for DJ Campbell. A lot of people forget that he came in as a 5-star offensive lineman ranked higher than Kelvin Banks. And obviously they probably got Kelvin Banks rating a little wrong. He should have been a top 10 player out of the country, out of high school, based on what we've seen thus far. But I still think DJ Campbell has that 5-star potential. But I think at this point, it's time to see it this year, right? Because if DJ Campbell is a 5-star and he's going to live up to that rating, what better season to do it than in your second year, right? You've been on campus for a year. You're acclimated. You're a college student now. You've got some significant playing time, over 120 snaps last year. This should be the year that he can get on the field and dominate, right? But if he doesn't, then I think all Texas fans will have question marks, especially if Cole Hutson is back in at the starter this year, right? And that's no disrespect to Cole Hutson, but if DJ Campbell is a 5-star and he's that talented of a player, it should show up on the field this year, especially when you have Kyle Flood, one of the best offensive line developers in the country. Cole Hutson, who came right in as an early enrollee last year, showed flashes, but for the most part, he wasn't great at that right guard position. DJ Campbell was better, but when he got in, there were some penalties. There were some mental lapses. We even saw in the Baylor game where Quinn Ewers, who is not vocal, had to get on DJ Campbell, right? So I think, there are some strengths and weaknesses with both players at that right guard position, but nonetheless, I don't think that we got great production as a whole from either one of those players last year. And so I think that this offseason will be huge in terms of determining who will be the starter at that position. And whether it's Cole Hutson or DJ Campbell, we need to be a lot better at right guard than we were last year. But I think if Cole Hutson wins this competition again and DJ Campbell is coming off the bench, I'll have serious concerns in terms of whether we'll ever see that 5-star potential at the University of Texas. And if Cole Hutson wins it again, then he has to be a lot better than he was last year, because a lot of times we could not get the run game going because they could not run behind Cole Hutson on that right side of the offensive line. Now, Cole Hutson is cross-training with Jake Majors competing at center, And this is interesting because we know last year they tried to replace Jake Majors with Junior Angelau, and now they're trying to replace Cole Hutson or replace Jake Majors with Cole Hutson, right? And obviously they want more size at the position. I think Jake Majors is really cerebral. He's really smart. He knows the offense, and you need that at the center position because they're going to be the person snapping the ball and calling out the protections. But it's obvious Kyle Flood wants to get bigger on the offensive line as a whole and wants to get bigger at the center position. And that's why Cole Hutson is training there. I would be very intrigued with the offensive line that had Cole Hutson at center and DJ Campbell at right guard, even though Jake Majors is a really smart player and somebody that's a leader on this football team. You got to be able to put the best five out there, even if that means taking Jake Majors off the field. And you've tried to replace him for 2 years in a row, so maybe this is the season you're able to do it. Cam Williams in the jumbo package. Look, I'm very comfortable with Christian Jones and Kelvin Banks being your 2 starting tackles, but I think a lot of people around Texas are intrigued by what Cam Williams can bring, right? A really big, offensive tackle from Duncanville that can just move people in the running game, right? But he's going to be your swing tackle this year. If anything were to happen to Kelvin Banks or Christian Jones, knock on wood, he could come in the game and replace them. But they're mentioning him in the Andre Kirich role last year in certain packages coming in as an extra tight end. And I would love that if you have 5 offensive linemen on the field plus 2 tight ends in JT Sanders and Cam Williams, right? I think that you could absolutely move people in the running game, but I don't want to see it a ton. And I think, sometimes last year we saw it too much, right? We are better in our receiver room than we were last year. So if you are going to use the jumbo package with Cam Williams as an extra tight end, you're either taking Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, or Isaiah Nayor off the field, and maybe even Jonte Cook or DeAndre Moore. You have to take a wide receiver off the field to put Cam Williams on it as a tight end. So in short yardage situations, I'm all for it. To fool the defense maybe and get, some extra yardage on a run game or on a run play, I'm all for it. Anything outside of that, we need 3 receivers plus on the field at all times. So, I would love to see them incorporate the jumbo package maybe a few times a game or a couple times every other game, but leaning on it like we did last year, taking those talented receivers off the field. I'm not interested in that just to see Cam Williams play tight end. And then Texas could use 7 to 8 linemen this year. Normally, I would be out on that, right? Because I think the offensive line group, that's a group that requires a lot of continuity, right? That's a group that requires a lot of cohesion. And I think every rep you have together, you get better over the season. But Texas does have an embarrassment of riches at the position, right? When you've brought in 14 over the last 3 recruiting cycles, you're going to have a lot of offensive linemen on campus, especially when you still have some that were here before Kyle Flood and Steve Sarkisian took over their position. So if the 5, let's say, are Kelvin Banks, Christian Jones, Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, and DJ Campbell, and then you have 6, Cam Williams coming off the bench as a swing tackle or extra tight end, and then 7, Cole Hutson coming in. Maybe if Kyle Flood feels like he can do better on a drive or in the second half than Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, or DJ Campbell, and you have some flexibility there, then I'm perfectly fine with Texas using 7 offensive linemen this year, even if the starting 5 are healthy, because I think the 2 coming off the bench can be assets for this Texas football team. And, you have to kind of deal with recruiting and keeping everybody happy. So if you can play 7 offensive linemen and not take away from the production on the field, then I think that works in your favor moving forward, because you're going to have a lot of offensive linemen sitting behind that starting 5 waiting on their turn and thinking about hitting the transfer portal if you don't keep them happy. So Kyle Flood is trying to find a way to put the best offensive lineman on the field while also not deal with anybody from his room entering the transfer portal. I respect it. Love these updates. Like I said, I still have questions about the interior offensive line, and it looks like they're trying to get that fixed before the first game against Rice. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we talk about Jordan Washington, the newest commit to the 40 acres. All right, really quickly, the latest player to commit on the 4th of July was Jordan Washington, a 3-star tight end out of Langham Creek in Houston, 6'4", 225. So obviously you want to see him gain some more weight, but definitely has the size as a tight end, number 486 nationally, number 29 tight end in the country, but he's the number 1 tight end in the state of Texas. Not sure why the 29th tight end in the country is the best tight end in the state of Texas, but that's just what the cycle looked like this year in 2024. Very athletic tight end. You know that you have to be a versatile tight end in Steve Sarkisian's system. Steve Sarkisian says that tight end is the second most important position on the field. So, we need an athletic player that can block, and get downfield and make plays in that way, but also be a security blanket in the short area of the field. Jordan Washington looks like he can do all of that on tape. He has a basketball background. Don't ask me why, but every great tight end had a basketball background. Shannon Sharp, Antonio Gates, Tony Gonzalez. Pretty sure Travis Kelce played basketball at some point. Darren Waller. Like, it's just a thing. All the great tight ends play basketball. Jordan Washington plays basketball. He checks that box, right? He has a competitive streak as a blocker. That's one thing you want to see is he doesn't look like he's being forced to block, or he doesn't look like on plays where he has to block, he's taking the play off, right? He goes out there and has a competitive streak as a blocker, and he plays like a big receiver, right? He can make plays down the field, runs a lot of seam routes, right? There's not a lot of, wiggle or Travis Kelce to his game. He's not a refined route runner, which you don't have to be as a high school tight end, but he can make plays, like I said, in the intermediate to short area, kind of as a security blanket, but you can also send him down the field and he can catch the ball 30 to 40 yards down the field as well. So complete tight end, somebody that can do everything that Steve Sarkisian would ask him to do in his system. Now, I do have a question about our tight end recruiting because, like Steve Sarkisian says, that's the second most important position in his offense. And we've been able to pretty much recruit at a high level everywhere on the offense, quarterback, receiver, offensive line, and running back. Even on the defensive side of the ball, since Steve Sarkisian and his staff have taken over, now you could say this is part of just being Texas, but we've recruited a blue chip player at every position, even on the defense, right? Edge, interior defensive line, defensive tackle, linebacker, off ball, on ball, corner, safety, you name it. We've recruited a blue chip player at every position on this Texas football team since Steve Sarkisian took over, but tight end. And I'm kind of questioning why we can't get the top tight ends in the country in Steve Sarkisian's offense with so much emphasis on that position. Now, this is no disrespect to Spencer Shannon, Will Randall, or Jordan Washington. And in no way am I saying they will be 3-star type players at the University of Texas because that's what they're rated right now. But I'm just questioning why we aren't competitive with some of the higher ranked or top tight ends in the country when we have such a talented offense that features the tight end the way we do. When you look at it, Jordan Washington, number 486 nationally. Spencer Shannon, number 759th nationally. Will Randall, number 999th nationally. All 3-star tight ends. So, like I said, we've been able to recruit really, really well at every other position on this football team, and we've been able to recruit at a dominant level in terms of offense on this Texas football team. But for tight end, we've only brought in 3-3-stars since this staff took over, and I'm just questioning why we're not competitive with some of the higher ranked and better tight ends in the country, even though I trust the staff and their evals, and I trust what they see in Jordan Washington, Spencer Shannon, and Will Randall, and I'm obviously rooting for them to be really good players at the 40 acres when it's their time. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hook 'em. Peace.